right, welcome to our first Ask Me Anything session. J.D. Greer, the current president of Southern Baptist Church, has a podcast titled Ask Me Anything, and that's where I got this name as well. You have questions, and we'll try to provide the answers. We will choose one question every 2 weeks and post a short video on our GEM YouTube channel with answers. So keep those questions coming. To ask a question, visit our website www.gmcem.org, and you'll find a place to post questions here. Okay. So the first question of Ask Me Anything is, which Christian books do you recommend? Which Christian books do you recommend? This is one of the questions I hear often from our members, and I think this is an excellent question to begin our Ask Me Anything session. I want to answer this question in three parts. First, I want to talk about the importance of reading books for Christians. Secondly, share my top 5 favorite authors. And third, share my favorite books according to different topics, all right? So number 1, importance of reading. First, I want to emphasize how important reading books are for Christians. I've had 2 Christian mentors in my life who have taught me so much about faith and how to live as a Christian. However, it was Christian books more than anything else that has and continues to mentor me in ministry and personal Christian life till this day. I've received so much wisdom, conviction, encouragement, and comfort from Christian books. I consider myself a reader. I'm not sure if I could categorize myself as an avid reader, but let me give you just the number of books I read. On average, I read about 5 books a month. Sometimes it could be 10, sometimes it could be 1 or 2, but on average, 5 books a month, 60 books a year. Also, I listen to podcasts. I'll say average about 40 podcasts per month. As a pastor, I'm very busy, just like every one of you. So I find myself usually reading on Mondays. That's my day off, or late in the evenings after my sons are, they've gone to bed. But I also try to redeem every 5 minutes I have. I usually read on a Kindle, so that means I always have my Kindle on my phone, which I carry everywhere. So when I'm waiting at the doctor's office, I get in 5 minutes of reading. When I'm waiting for someone in the cafe, I get 5 minutes of reading there. Another option for those who are busy are audiobooks. You can listen to a book while you're driving or commuting to work. So that's one way if I don't have time. Audiobooks are a great option. Before you read Christian books, you should and must read your Bible. That's your primary text. Nothing should replace reading your Bible. So I want to start off there. And number 2, secondly, you should read Christian books. And this is what our session is about today. So I'll go more into detail soon. Third, every Christian should also read non-Christian books. They should read their Bible, should read Christian books, but you should also read non-Christian books. As Christians, we need to read widely. We need to read and listen to news, be updated on current events. We need to read literature, history books, and every other kinds of books. For most of my adult life, I read primarily Christian books. However, in the past several years, I started to binge read on secular leadership books, counseling books, and currently I'm binging on popular literatures like Hunger Games and Divergent. Yeah, I'm very late to these, fiction books. The reason why it's important to read non-Christian books is so that you will know what people are reading and thinking, so that you'll be a more effective witness to the world. That you'll be in the world, but not of the world. Fourth, I want to ask you a question. Do you know how to read? And that sounds like a silly question in 21st century. We might all answer, of course we know how to read. But I want to recommend the secular book that teaches us how to read a book. And it's titled How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler. And this is a classic book. And after reading this book, many of you might realize, I don't really know how to read a book. So this is an excellent book for adults, excellent book for your high school and even your middle school students, right? I strongly recommend this book. As Christians, We need to be better communicators, better readers, and writers. And so this is an excellent book that I recommend before reading any of the Christian books. I will recommend from here on. Right. Number two, I want to introduce my favorite Christian authors and slash podcasts that have made a tremendous impact in my life. Whenever I find an author I like, what I do is I devour all the books, all the resources that they have written. Because if I found a good author, I know all of their works will be good. So for the following five authors, I have read almost all their books, and they continue to produce books. I get them as soon as possible when it comes out. Number one on my list of favorite author is, not surprisingly, Timothy Keller. He's one of the most popular Christian authors today. I quote him often in my sermons, so that won't be surprising to any of you. Number two on my list is Paul David Tripp. I mentioned him several times. His name might not be as familiar as Timothy Keller, but both of them graduated from Westminster Theological Seminary in Philadelphia. Tripp used to be a professor at CCEF, Christian Counseling Education Foundations. And now he has his own ministry, Paul David Tripp Ministries, as an author and speaker. His books have really helped me on sanctification and in counseling other people. So I recommend Paul David Tripp and whatever books or resources have you written. Number three, it's not an author but an organization that I just mentioned, CCEF. The two main authors here are David Paulison and Ed Welch. And this organization has helped me tremendously in specific issues that every person experiences: fear, anger, shame, and a host of other emotions, or issues that we deal with. Number four is Craig Rochelle. On the topic of leadership, he's the go-to guy for me. He's a pastor of a large multi-site church called Life Church. I've never heard of his sermon, so I have no comment here. I feel like most of his sermons are not really gospel, but horizontal, but I don't want to comment. These are just assumptions by looking at the titles of his sermon. But his podcast on leadership is excellent. And if you aspire to grow in your leadership in any field or organization, listen to his podcast. Fifth and finally, my favorite author is Eric Metaxas, and he's my favorite Christian biography author. So those are my top five. Third and finally, I want to share my favorite book or books for each category within Christianity. Number one, Introduction to Christianity. Let's say you want to read a book that just gives you a good introduction of Christianity or gospel, or you want to buy a book or recommend a book to someone that's new to Christianity. Let me recommend two books. Number one is Basic Christianity by John Stott. And number two is Gospel, Recovering the Power That Made Christianity Revolutionary by J.D. Greer. So these are two books. Secondly, books on counseling. If you want a good book on counseling, read any of the books by CCEF and Paul David Tripp. If you're experiencing or want to help someone who's going through depression, anxiety, fear, anger, shame, or any of these topics, read books by CCEF and Paul David Tripp. Let me recommend you three books within counseling. Number one, When People Are Big and God is Small by Ed Welch. Number two, Side by Side by Ed Welch. And number three, Instruments in the Redeemer's Hand by Paul David Tripp. The third one, Instruments, it's a very extensive book, but it's one of the most helpful books on counseling. Number three, the books that I recommend for Christian biography. First of all, I recommend that you read Christian biography because it motivates us to live courageously and sacrificially like the Christian heroes before us. So I think we need to recover reading biographies, especially Christian biographies. So anything from Eric Metaxas is great. Let me recommend two shorter biographies. First one is 7 Great Men and the Secret of Their Greatness. Number two, 7 Great Women and the Secret of Their Greatness. If you want to read longer biographies of one individual, I recommend William Wilberforce and Dietrich Bonhoeffer by Eric Metaxas as well. Number 4, marriage. On the topic of marriage, I would strongly recommend The Meaning of Marriage by Timothy Keller. I'm sure a lot of you guys know this book or have read this book, but I love this book because he focuses on gospel-centered marriage. I know there's a lot of books, and I've read a lot of books on marriage, but this is still my go-to book on marriage. Number 5, parenting. If you're looking for a book on Christian parenting, I strongly recommend Parenting, the 14 Gospel Principles That Can Radically Change Your Family by Paul David Tripp. Again, I read a lot of books on parenting, and this is by far the best one. Number 5, on homosexuality. It's still a big issue in the world and in the church. I've read a lot of books on homosexuality, but here, What Does the Bible Say About Homosexuality by Kevin DeYoung is still one of the best one out there with a conservative view. Number 6, for teachers, if you're a teacher in preschool, elementary, or youth, or even cell group leaders, I would like to recommend a book called Teaching to Change Lives by Howard Hendricks. Every teacher and cell group leader must read this book. Number 7, on leadership. If you want to grow as a leader in any organization, not just in church, but maybe in your company or whatever you lead, podcast by Craig Groeschel and another podcast called Global Leadership Summit. It's a yearly conference, and if they have a podcast, and they have a lot of videos of great Christian leaders in every field, giving a lecture on leadership. Number 8, if you want a big picture of the Bible, I recommend God's Big Picture, Tracing the Storyline of the Bible by Vaughn Roberts, right? So it's always important to have a big picture of the Bible, and God's big picture is a good one. Number 9, Apologetics. For a good book on apologetics, I recommend Jesus Among Secular Gods by Ravi Zacharias. He just passed away. He's one of the giants of Christian apologetics today. By reading this book, you'll understand all the competing worldviews today. 10th and finally, Worldview. A resource on Christian worldview, I recommend this author, Albert Mohler. And he's the president of Southern Baptist Seminary. Any book, podcast, or video by him is excellent. Today, his book, The Gathering Storm, came out. I just started reading the first chapter before recording this, and it looks great, The Gathering Storm. He also has a podcast called The Briefing, and it's an excellent podcast to understand the world, particularly United States politics and culture in a Christian worldview. All right, there you have it, my favorite authors, books, or podcasts by categories. Remember, this is a subjective list by me. Who's your favorite author or book? Leave your comment down there. I'd love to hear it. Regardless, I want to encourage you to read Christian books and even podcasts so that you will continue to grow in your faith. All right, God bless you.